Good evening, or good afternoon, or good morning, depends where you are. Welcome to the most eloquent and exciting part of all the World Cup racing weekend. It's ghost time. It is inside the tape. We're going to look at all the lines, all the options, all the rocks, the dust, the routes, and the ways you can go, and then try and figure out which one's quicker. We'll give it a go, but first we need to do a rundown track top to bottom. I was practicing until my shoulder got too sore, so I've got intimate knowledge of exactly what's going on. So in the start gate, you get ready, you take a deep breath and you go down that start ramp. It's a nice mellow one, not too steep like other ones, and you can get a good few pedals in to get up to speed. Pump bump and then into a gap that at race speed you've got to squash. Under the tunnel, and there's a really tricky left that's getting loose. Bit of rain could help, but it would ruin the rest of the track, so we don't want it to rain. And you have to set up for the next right-hander. It's a really tricky one. You've got to get the braking done. It's loose up on the bank and then get off the brakes for the turn. It's really tight at the start, but then it kind of mellows out and turns again, and it's really easy to overcommit to it and then have to do a second sharper turn, so you've got to smooth that turn out. Back under the funicular track, and then you go into the first rocky section. So there's a few rocks here, it's quite narrow, they've stuck a pole in the way and you just wiggle around it. Then you've got your first main line choice. You can follow the rut, or you can jump high onto the rocks. You jump high onto the rocks, you've got to get far enough that you don't ding your wheels, but it does set you up better for the next left-hand turn. Down that left-hander, super steppy, super rough. The bumps here are big enough that you're going to be buzzing your bum off that back wheel, because it doesn't look like it. It's so chunky through here. Lily pad over the rock with a left and a right line. Most people favouring the left line as it sets you up just a little bit better for the next turn. Rail that corner, drop off the last few rocks, and then you're onto a much smoother bit of track. Deep breath, relax, keep the speed going. Over a bridge, soak it up best you can, and then it goes slightly uphill, pump the ground, few pedal strokes, and you absolutely motor up into beautiful scrub jump. That's where you see Bryceland not pedaling and Warner absolutely having kittens that he wasn't pedaling before he won. That gives you a little breather before you head into the steeper, gnarlier section. Into this section there's a gap that Bruni did. Not seen many people doing it, but we may see some people doing it in the race. Down into some tight turns which you can inside. You've got to be delicate with the brakes, not a lot of support in there before you get to the wall section. I feel like it's running easier than it has done in the past, given all the crash videos and things we've seen from it, but the holes in there are severe. Huge compressions. Some riders are gapping them, some riders are just taking the hits and cracking on. You can set up a little wide into the turn at the bottom. If that corner gets a massive hole in it, you may see people sitting up super wide and trying to inside it, or others are just going to rail down there and slap that corner. After that, there's a high and a low line. I don't think there's a lot in it. The high line is more finesse and it's a little bit harder to get right, but it does set you up better for the turn down the next straight. After that, you get to what I think is the most critical turn on the track. It's a really flat, really innocuous right-hander. It's got no support. Really, really tricky to get it good, and the speed you carry out of it takes you all the way down this next traverse. So it's really flat along this traverse, it's a little bit darker in the trees, the sun doesn't hit the track, so it's actually quite slippy in there. Even though the rest of the track is really dry and dusty, I've seen a lot of people crash in this dark woods. Not sure if you'll see it in the live feed, but if someone's down on time, chances are they probably washed out in that wood section. Then we deviate onto some fresh, loamy bits of track, which are really, really good, really fun. One of the few soft bits on the track anyway. Then as you come out of those trees, there's a couple options. There's a straight line going super high. There is a middle line where you go down across some off-camber rocks and then hit a catch at the bottom, and there's a super high line you can set up on to then go low. And this is where things get really complicated, and we're gonna do some ghosting here, because dear God, there's so many options. As we delve into this comparison, I just want to make it clear that we only managed to compare the riders we managed to film on these specific runs. There may be faster lines that were done during the day, but some riders do tend to keep them secret. So these are the fastest riders we managed to capture. Here we have Phil Atwell demonstrating the inside to low and swinging up around the pole, then another slight middle line and then fully wide right next to the tree and round that left. Then we have Omri Piron, he goes high above the tree there, super wide and then onto that wider line. So similar but a little bit different. Let's compare the two, and as they come into the section you see Phil swinging low and Amari committing onto that higher line. They're both looking really similar, but then as Phil works his way back up, Amari is tearing into the lead. He carves around that lower line as Phil insides, and then as Amari swings up onto that high line you can see he's already got bike lengths on Phil. As he comes around the wider line, it looks like it is definitely a healthy lead to Amari in this section, 1.1 seconds. Now we have Matt Walker showing the wider line into this section, then high and then onto that wide main line. He gaps across just like Amari did in that previous run, and it is looking really fast. Next we have Justin Steiner on the same entrance to this section with a few pedal strokes there, and he goes inside on this next bit and then directly into that next left-hander. So it was a lot slower in, but let's see how it compares. So as they come into this section, you can see Matt Walker gets that first corner really clean. He's freewheeling and carrying speed as Justin pedals to try and catch up. Matt then swings onto that low line, and look how direct Justin is, going straight down next to the tape. It's not looking good though, like Matt is still well into the lead, so it's unlikely that Justin's going to catch up. So as they come around this corner, he does catch up, and he actually wins this section by 0.08, but it might have set him up bad for that next turn, so it is tricky to tell. It certainly looked fast though. Now we got fast Frenchie like Bruni going nice and direct on that inside, up onto the high and then round that main line. It's super consistent and it looks really quick. Then we got his teammate Finn Isles. He goes the lower wide line and then a very similar line to Loic on the second part of the track. Let's see which is best. So as they come into the section you can see Loic going super direct as Finn rails around that outside line, and already Loic is bike lengths in front of Finn. So as they come down here, Finn is going to have to be carrying some serious speed to catch him up. So you can see there are 3 bike lengths between them, and unless Finn does something extremely spectacular in this next section, I cannot see how he can catch Loic. And they come round super high above the tree, wide as you can get, round the corner, and yeah, Loic takes that by 0.047, half a second to the fast Frenchie. So at the end of the ghosting section you do the big wide open photographer's left hand corner. All the togs are just camped out there shooting up the hill with their long lenses, getting people coming over the crest, dust flying. It just looks absolutely sick. You really want to get those tyres to bite in to set you up for the next turn. The next turn has a few different options. Some riders are getting super high and then going really inside right next to the post and doing a little hop over it. Makes the next turn tighter, but it is the shortest way through. The next option, which most people are doing, is hitting that middle rut. You can hook round that middle rut, but then you have to pick the bike up over a root and then gap into the next turn. There's another option going super wide, and there's a nice bank that you can rail round. But to get into the next bit, you have to pull out of the turn, gap across and land on the next bank. If you don't do that and plough your front wheel into the bank, then you nearly die. Whichever option you take around that corner, the next one is a single line. You gap into left hand or rail the turn and then triple over a rock into the next section. And then after that, there's a really tricky left-hander. Some people are setting up wide and going round the rock so they have a smoother transition into the turn. Some people are going over the rock and pushing the bike down immediately, but it's a little bit slower to do that. It's actually a really complicated turn and a hard one to get really good. After that, you just follow the main line, carry the speed through the ruts, keep your eyes up, stay off the brakes, into the berms, and then you get to some huge jumps. They look tiny when riders are going fast. Then down into the next right-hand berm. It's got a few lines into it. The inside was running really nice, but a big hole's developed in it, so riders are having to stay inside of the hole. The outside might actually become the better line here, but we're going to have to see how it develops. Big left-hander, then you get into the huge gravel road step down. Again, looks tiny. It's really big, really big. At race speed, you squash this, land, and there's massive, big, soft, whooped out braking bumps down that next straight. If you can stay off the brakes and just let the bike deal with them, you can carry a lot of speed into this next woods. Lots of little hidden roots, little hidden ruts, little hidden soft bits in there, so you've got to keep the eyes up, make sure you don't deviate off your line. Then after that, you get some big compressions where there's some options to double onto the road, or people are just swerving and just trying to keep the wheels on the ground. It's rider's choice through here, but it's a really fun section to ride. After that, the huge rock. Big boulder that in the past we've seen people gapping off and then having disasters, but now some roots have been taken out, it's running dry and it's really nice. You just send it off of that, take the big compression and head down into the next section. Some rocky steps that you just don't want to go too fast through because it would be easy to wash your wheels off the side of them. And you do a big drop out into slightly more open trees, and then there's another option. There's an inside over the rock, which makes the turn one big long curve, but it's not quite as supportive, or there's an outside. It's a tighter turn, but you can just rail it off this rock. And round the left-hander, and you get into the section that caused loads of issues in years past, but it must have been smoothed out. The takeoff hip jump has been mellowed, and it's not as kicky, and most riders are doing this hip and landing it nice and smooth. The obvious line is to go right, which most kind of normal riders would do, but it's actually a little bit off camera and sets you up bad for the next bit. You want to go straight, high, over the rocks. There's a super high line, there's a middle line, and there's a slightly lower line that kicks you less, but it's much harder to hold it straight and fast. Down into the next section, there's a few steps out, and that corner will hold you no matter what. Slight left-hander that you hold high to set you up for the next right, and then we've got another line split. There's the original track that goes low, rails round a berm, really easy to trust, but it's a longer way around. There's an inside line that's a little bit more finesse required to get onto it, and if it rains at all, it'll be really tricky to do, but it does set you up super straight into the next corner. Down into the next bit, there is a low and a high line above the tree. The low is easier, but it's getting a little bit of a funny wiggle in it, and some of the rocks in there are quite slippy. The higher line, trickier to get onto, but it does allow you to set up straighter into that next section. The final corner out of that tricky rocky section has a natural spring in it, and there's water sitting on the rocks there. This is the corner that Bruni crashed on back in, I think, 2017, and it's just really slippy into this turn. It's easy to come in too fast, and the drop into it's actually really big. It's about 4 foot, but when riders are doing it fast, it doesn't look it. Take that turn as fast as you can, big G out, then you get into the final jump section. Little step up, and then a really big step down that, when you're looking at it, doesn't look like you'll be able to clear it, but you come in so fast, it's no problem. And then, the bizarre feature, the moto whoops. They're actually really fun. I quite like them. Jump in, weight back, and just let the bike deal with it. And there's some slippy rocks in that turn as well, as the moisture is kind of coming out the ground. So you see a lot of people maybe getting a little slip on in those final 2 turns. And then last bit, on the bridge, on the gas, squash off that huge step down, stay off the brakes, and speed tuck into the finish. And that's it, the Lourdes downhill track. A really, really good downhill track. And it's one that I'd seen on the live feed and thought, I don't think I want to ride that because it looks so sketchy, but tell you what, in the dry, so much fun. Really challenging on the body, really physical, but fast and exciting. Lots of line choice as well, and I hope you appreciated our little analysis there, but we have learned that some people do keep lines secret, and they do go through them quite slowly, so take these results with a pinch of salt. Let's watch the racing and see what works best.